Welcome into Grayson Grundhoefer Sic'Em365.com. And Grayson, we saw a carnival of points last week in Lubbock from the Baylor offense, a great special teams performance. Josh Cameron, conducted his opus. He might have several other good games down the stretch, but it was great to see for a guy who is a former walk-on, who's worked harder than probably anybody on that roster to get to that point, have that kind of a game. I think, especially since he is so well-liked, that's going to buoy them. I have many thoughts on this, and this is a time where they can maybe finally go on a winning streak given the schedule. It's just weird saying this, but this is the most important game they've probably played in the last decade against a 3-4 team.
It definitely is. I think in general, as you kind of alluded to, that Texas Tech game, I mean, it can quickly be forgotten if they don't come out and play well against Oklahoma State and come away with a win. It's been 2 years since fans have left McLean Stadium with a Big 12 conference win. And that is pretty crazy to think about. The last time they won was in late October against Kansas in 2022. This is an opportunity to kind of right that ship a little bit. And I mean, they're going to have a couple opportunities because TCU next week, obviously 1-9 in the last 10 against TCU. And then you go to Morgantown. You've never won in Morgantown before. So lots of opportunities here to get right. I think just for Baylor in general, it's about building on the performance they had last week. And truthfully, against the team that they're playing against in Oklahoma State, this feels like a game they really need to win. Just, for the fans, for the home crowd, for it being homecoming, for an opportunity to kind of get rid of that losing feeling at home. I think it's really, really important.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. I think that if they can get this one, then it opens up the door for a lot of better things. It's great news for the coaching staff. If they don't, last week doesn't matter all that much anymore, does it?
No, it doesn't. And I mean, then it kind of leads you into, the more that I looked at this kind of schedule and the way this season was going to play out, I had them beating Texas Tech last week and kind of thinking that was the game they had to win. But as you look forward into the schedule, it's like, well, you really need to win one of these next two games, at least against Oklahoma State and TCU, two teams that are big time rivals for you, honestly. And guys, schools that you recruit against very often. And so, yeah, these are some big ones for them. And I do think you're exactly right. You come home after this great performance on the road, and then in front of your home fans, you just kind of lay an egg. That would be really disappointing. And yeah, I think for a lot of people, it just kind of be like, oh, last weekend was a fluke.
Yeah. So last week we saw Sawyer Robertson continue to come into his own. I think Bryson Washington established himself as the lead dog in the running game. What else did you see last week that this team's maybe needed to do or hasn't been able to do that turned around?
I think getting guys healthy was a big thing. Caden Jenkins probably was the best player on the field for Baylor last game, and that's pretty crazy to say given that Sawyer played so well, but Caden was awesome in that football game, also had the interception, and obviously they didn't have him for a little bit. And so getting him back was big. I felt like Carl Williams is finally starting to turn the corner from getting injured in that Tarleton State game. He's starting to get healthier, and he was supposed to be one of their best defense players, if not their best defense player. And so getting those guys back, I think, was key for that particular game. And then as far as the other things that you mentioned, the run game getting going was huge, and they added some off-tackle runs that I think really kind of tricked out Texas Tech a little bit, and also just gave them opportunities to, I think, just take advantage of the defense that they saw. Because for the majority of the year, I mean, it was literally just inside zone, straight up the middle. So getting a little diverse with the run game, I think, will help open up some things and hopefully help them in the run game going forward. Because I do think that if this team's able to run the football, I think Sawyer and the offensive line have proven to be good enough that they can really take advantage of that. But if they're not running the football and you allow the defense to kind of pin their ears back and get after Sawyer and, make things tough for the receivers, then the passing game can kind of go off the rails at times. Even though Sawyer's been able to control it, it has felt, at times in games, you look at the second half against Iowa State, you look at, the first quarter against BYU, they had struggles. And so if you're able to run the football, I think it really alleviates some of those struggles and takes a lot of pressure off Sawyer Robertson and allows him to, I think, perform at his highest level.
How important is it for them is it more important for them to get Alan Bowman off kilter or do what most teams this year have done and not allow them to run the ball with Ollie Gordon?
Don't allow them to run the football. It's exactly what they tried to do against Texas Tech, and I think they succeeded at it. I know that you look at the box score and Taj Brooks had 125 yards and a touchdown. That's fine, but you never felt like he was taking over that football game. And that's how Baylor, I think, needs to approach this week. If you're going to make someone beat you, it needs to be Alan Bowman. You cannot allow Ollie Gordon to run for 150, 200 yards on you. If you allow that, then it opens up more for their offense. It takes a lot of pressure off Alan Bowman and might allow him to be more efficient. And this is a guy that's thrown 7 interceptions their last 4 games. So, yeah, I think you definitely want to make him beat you and make him consistently drive them down the field without making mistakes. I think that's certainly a key to the game because I do think after last week, Oklahoma State's really going to try to get back to running the football effectively because they haven't done that all year outside of last week.
Yeah. I do like it's the thing that sucks for if you're Oklahoma State is that they've got these 3 really good wide receivers and they've got a quarterback who can occasionally get the ball out to them, but hasn't really. And then the hope is that everybody commits so hard to Ollie Gordon that Alan Bowman and his nearly 1-to-1 TD to INT ratio wasn't going to be a big deal. Well, that's not worked out for them. Plus, for Baylor offensively, they just need to go score on a defense that everybody is scoring on. You have to just do what everybody else has done. This seems like a pretty cut and dry thing, but I think the pits in everybody's stomach about, they just don't beat these conference teams at home the last 2 years.
You're exactly right. I think that's where the vibes kind of get thrown off a little bit. It's just because, everything points to Baylor having success here. This doesn't feel like a bigger challenge than last week against Tech, and now you're getting them at home. But it is one of those things where you're facing a program that has consistently won games like this. When their back is against the wall, they find ways to win these type of football games and eventually make a bowl game, which I think is disappointing this year because most years this is, a 9-10 win type program. 8 is usually their floor. And so this year they're having a bad year, but they still want to make a bowl game. And they still have a coach that's kept them, I think, pretty locked in. We'll see if that changes this week. But yeah, I think in general, that's the thing that I think scares people and certainly gives me some pause when I'm picking this game because maybe Alan Bowman just has a great performance. Maybe Ollie Gordon's able to run the football pretty consistently. And maybe Baylor's offense just isn't able to deal with Oklahoma State's defensive line like they were against Texas Tech. Those are all concerns for me, but I think in general, this game does set up very well for Baylor. If you look at what Oklahoma State's done all year, what Baylor has honestly done all year, and then you look at last week and the current trends, it just feels like these are 2 teams trending in very different directions, and that should mean very good things for Baylor, but there are reasons for concern. And you mentioned the receivers for Oklahoma State. That's a big concern of mine, but if you kind of look a little bit deeper into what happened last year, this Oklahoma State team, when you look at SP Plus and the numbers, is relatively similar to this year's team. So the 2 are very comparable. It's just last year's team won a lot of close games and ended up 10-4. But their quarterback was still 15 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. So this wasn't a huge shift outside of their run game. That's the one thing that they were just dominant towards the end of the year. And then you look at this year and they're just not able to run the football. And that makes kind of the biggest difference between last year's team and this year's team. And that's why I think Baylor definitely needs to make that the focal point of this game.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Grayson, they put together 4 quarters last week. 4 quarters. It wasn't like this wasn't one big half and then, scurriedly or like holding on to something. This was 4 quarters, and not just 4 random quarters from 4 games that they played this year, because that was kind of how it felt. What do you think that does for the confidence of a team that's kind of what we kept hearing from Dave Aranda was, just get like one full game together. He like kind of was like, if they could just get one full game together, he thinks he could break through that wall that they've been hitting.
Right. And I mean, it's all about confidence, right? You know, this program, just the last year and a half, it's just been really hard because you lose all these games. You've had a couple close ones that you let slip away. You're just not quite used to winning. And it really bleeds into the end of the 2022 season, of course. But I think you need to see wins. You need to see positive results and positivity and momentum right on the field. And I think that's the biggest thing with this is you've proven you can do it. You've proven that you can put together 4 quarters. You're not a team that's, gonna lose every close game. You can try to put that behind you now, and then move forward to just kind of building off of it, right? And I think that's the biggest thing. It's proof of concept, and I think that's huge when guys get to see that and rally behind that and feel like, okay, now there's some momentum to build behind. There's substance here. There's a win, and now can we build on that? Can we get better? And that's something that I think, the offense and the defense from Dave Aranda to Jake Spavital, they've talked about that. Building on these performances, getting more consistent, and then hopefully having success at the end of the day. And I think that's what they're leaning towards, and that's what they're trending towards. But again, you got to take care of business at home, and Baylor hasn't been able to do that the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think people can go look at our predictions on Sic'Em365.com, so they can go look at that and see what we did. Not to give it away, but this is the first time this season where we've all kind of overwhelmingly been in the Baylor camp, and it hasn't been split. So, I mean, people can read the individual ones. I will tell you my favorite is Emory's. Emory, of all the teams Baylor plays, like, he hates Oklahoma State more than I think TCU. Because he grew up in Oklahoma, he hates the Pokes. Hates them.
Wow.
So,
I mean, I've never heard that from a Baylor fan, that their most hated team is Oklahoma State. It's
Am I wrong, Emory? Am I wrong?
Oh, no, I can't stand it.
Yeah, that's it. Most people would put them like 3rd or 4th, maybe.
If that.
I
mean,
like most would be like TCU and Tech and
Texas,
A&M, like,
yeah.
Even though it's been like that one's waning because they haven't played in so long, but there's still disdain.
Oh, it's not waning. It's still very much there. Yeah, it very much is. But I picked Baylor to win this week as well, Paul, as you saw in there. A lot of double-digit victories predicted by the staff. We've been pretty good this year as a staff. Like, our overall numbers, a lot of people are 5-2 or 6-1. So I think we've been pretty spot on with the trends, and the few that we've missed have been most of those have been close games. I think the 2 that I missed happen to be Colorado and BYU, which is super unfortunate because those were 2 games that really came down to a coin flip. But yeah, I think Baylor's going to win this game. I have them as a 10-point winner. It's currently a 7-point spread, which has continued to rise throughout the week from 3.5. And I mainly think that Baylor's offense is going to have a lot of success. Sawyer Robertson's playing like a top 5 quarterback in the Big 12. And I expect Dave Aranda to have a pretty good game plan for what he's going to see from Oklahoma State to at least limit them and to force enough turnovers that I think Baylor will push it a little bit and put a little separation between them and Oklahoma State.
Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com. Grayson, enjoy the game tomorrow. We'll talk to you next week